Hi, this is Stephen R. of Zygote. It is 12 o'clock, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. It is the Architects and Hero live stream show. I am here and very honored to have Sam Prekop from the Sea and Cake joining us today. Thank you so much, Sam. Really, really appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So today I have to talk to you a little bit. You know, Comma was released recently, and it's one of the, it's your fifth solo record outside of the work that you've done with the Sea and Cake and with Shrimp Boat and other various projects that you've been involved with. And I'd like you to talk to me a little bit about, I guess, evolution of your solo work and how you've differentiated it yourself as a creative coming from where you were and where you are with the Sea and Cake and moving into your own solo work and how that evolved into more, I guess, synthesizer-based experimentation.
So I've had a long time relationship with being interested in electronic instruments and electronic music. It's been a big part of the Sea and Cake's palette, you know, as well. But so I give credit to John for opening me up to thinking about synthesizers and getting into them. And, you know, he's an avid synth collector and user and all this stuff. And so my own electronic studio started building up, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years before Old Punch Card, which was like 2010. But there's also, like, I did a lot of bonus tracks for The Fawn at my very primitive at the time home studio, which was also electronic based kind of stuff. Those came out only in Japan, but so that was the origins of thinking about doing that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until I decided I had bought all this stuff, I need to try to make a record out of it to make sense of having, you know, my studio was getting much more quite developed at that time, but I was never satisfied with working in sort of pop formats and with those types of electronic music. So it wasn't until I decided that I didn't need to do that was a huge breakthrough. And so Old Punch Card is a really important record for me in terms of that, sort of giving myself license to do kind of whatever I want, although it was a huge, you know, super exciting to decide that I could, you know, be abstract with it. It didn't have to be pop based. It didn't have to feel like songs necessarily and all this stuff. So this was, you know, a very exciting time for me, etc. My previous solo records, which, to be honest, they came about because there was always breaks in between Sea and Cake records. Like, we'd finish one, we'd do the tour, and then John would get caught up with Tortoise, and I would find myself with extra time and like, well, I need to do something. And so that's why I started doing these solo records, just because I felt like I could keep doing stuff. And I was, I guess I felt like I knew I was participating in the scene at that time, you know, so I knew people like Josh Abrams and Chad. I didn't know them at the time, but I was familiar with them through other friends and stuff. And that sort of collaborative air was happening at that time. And I felt like I took advantage of people being open to, you know, jazz guys playing on a pop record and vice versa. And it's sort of, you know, reflects my listening habits always. You know, I've always been quite all over the place. You know, I was always a huge jazz fan and you know, the range of everything, you know, world music and Velvet Underground, you know, whatever. So, and that sort of, you know, the Sea and Cake and Shrimp Boat especially reflects that wide-ranging listening habits and stuff. So.
Yeah, there's definitely a differentiation between it, but when I first put Comma on, there's something almost instantly recognizable about the textures and the color and the sounds of how you arrange and put things together. I would not have been surprised to hear some of the elements that I heard on Comma in a Sea and Cake record. And it feels like you've developed a signature that is so uniquely yours in the creative projects that you've worked on, that there seems to be a through line, although it can be elusive at times, but hear it, and like sometimes when I heard Comma before I knew it was Comma, somebody was playing it in the room, and I knew to some degree that you might have had your hands on it. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to. I have to admit, like the Sea and Cake and my solo, it's cut from the same cloth. Like I don't wear different hats necessarily. You know, the real core of my expressive energy is the same. Really, it's not. I don't have to like make a broad switch from one to the other, kind of. I mean, I know ultimately it will be different somewhat, but how I approach it is very similar. You know, I feel like I'm always exploring, trying to surprise myself, hoping to get better all the time and closer to what I think is interesting and really good music, basically. But for Comma, I did allow myself, I guess for starting with Old Punch Card and the Republic, I was consciously like staying away from regular rhythms and any sort of pop elements. And I assumed that was going to be the case for Comma this time as well, actually, when I started. But as the work progressed, I could sense that it was leaning more towards things that could happen with the Sea and Cake. And I decided to follow the work and kind of embrace that direction. And that's how it worked. So it was not predetermined. I start out hopefully with a pretty open mind and palette. You know, my process is really just looking and exploring sounds, and eventually they start to coalesce and become music. But it's a long process, and it never I'm just open-minded with whatever direction it might possibly take, and to try to follow it as accurately as possible.
With that through line, is it a conscious decision? Do you have are there things in the palette that you're like, this is something I want to refer back to? Because even though from a compositional perspective, they're radically different in certain ways. I mean, listen to Old Punch Card, which is basically music concrete on some level. I kind of associate it with that a little bit. And then you listen to Comma, that could almost have been on the Warp Records Artificial Intelligence series of records, right? So there's a kind of a big difference in that, but you can still have that through line. Is there a commonality that you can particularly point to and say, this is a thing that I take, this is the through line between those things, or is it just your process?
I mean, I think what I decide are good and interesting sounds and beautiful sounds in a way, I think that's the through line. I mean, I think what interests me is a certain kind of sound, and I can't help it, sort of, you know. It's not maybe I should try more to deny myself of those habits, you know. I'm always, so there's basically types of sounds that I'm always attracted to, and certain, you know, there's even like, you know, there's chords I favor over other ones and stuff like, and you know, certain notes I like. I don't even know what they are necessarily until I hear them, and I know, oh, this feels right. It feels perhaps mysteriously beautiful or expressive beyond my naming it that sort of. So I'm just attracted and sort of moved by certain kinds of sounds, and I hope that's expressed in, you know, the Sea and Cake and my more abstract electronic stuff, and I noticed like on Punch Card, and I've always felt this. So a lot of like Sea and Cake fans were pretty, I don't know if they fully embraced it out of the gate when I first put it out. Like, you know, what is this? This doesn't make any sense coming from the singer of the Sea and Cake, whatever. But I always felt if you could get past the surface of it, that you could tell that I made it, kind of, sort of, because I did. It's not like I've changed radically to do something else. It's just, reflects evolving interests, and that's how I approach everything.
It's looking back at the record that came out just previous to Comma, The Republic, that was a soundtrack to an installation, to an art piece as well. And when I think of Throughline, I also think of your photography. I think of the work that you do in that vein. And to touch a little bit on sort of your background, your father, Martin, is a photographer. Your brother is a furniture designer. Your other brother's a painter. You've painted. You've been in photography. When I see a photo of yours, there's kind of a space to it, and again, with the through line, there's a recognizable quality to the composition of the work you do visually. And to kind of thread that through your collaboration on Republic and how that influences, or how those mediums influence one another. Could you talk a little bit about that work? I know that also on Self-Titled magazine, you had you were sharing stories and snapshots behind titles of the current record, again, to kind of connect those dots. So could you talk a little bit about how visual art and the visual art that you do, photography, impacts your audio work, and how do you see the interplay between those things?
So yeah, that Self-Titled piece, that's not something I would do naturally. Like, I don't feel like I need to make that connection, even though it's there, because I'm doing both, obviously. But I did find it interesting. It was an exercise in a way, and it's related to also how I title pieces. I listen to it and I intuit what it's telling me, what title it should have. And I assign the photos in a similar way. It's sort of like one more title for each piece, one more way that I can describe in that moment how this photo maybe I can thread, stretch a thin thread between the music and that photo. Kind of, it's not definitive. It's just sort of what I was thinking at that time could work. And in a way, I think I could have assigned almost not any photo, but more than one photo could have worked with each of those pieces of music. And I think partially it's because, as you had mentioned, I take it as high praise that you can recognize my photos as perhaps Sam Prekop photos, and it's sort of, and I think it's because hopefully that I'm expressing myself honestly with the photography and the music. And so it's, there's no, I'm not like thinking ahead of how these things might work together or how they're going to affect each other. But since I do both, I conclude that they must, in a way.
There's not just a vision of part to say, I'm creating a thing, or I'm inspired that I've captured something in my day-to-day life that I consider to be significant. I've captured that as a photograph, and there's something within the sound. There's never that kind of conscious decision. It's just sort of they're mutually exclusive until you decide. Maybe it was more closely aligned with the collaboration on Republic with David Hart. I know maybe they're mutually exclusive, but I've always found that, at least from the outside looking in, I've always found that interesting about you as an artist, that there are these different elements. And I know, like, some of your contemporaries from Chicago and now globally have, like, Rob Mazurek from Isotope 217, the Chicago Underground, and all the other amazing stuff that he does is a visual artist as well. And
Right.
I've always been really interested in the interplay between those things. And then looking at the electronic solo work that you did on Republic and the collaboration with David Hart, do you consider those separate from a process perspective?
Well, in a basic way, yeah. I mean, there are different tools to get to a similar end, which is just to be creatively expressive. You know, so becoming a musician was not in my grand plan. I started as, I went to art school not to be in a rock band, so even though that's where it started. But I went for painting, and I mean, I guess I still consider myself a visual artist before a musician, I guess, in a way, if I had to choose. But obviously they're equally not, one is not more important than the other, obviously. But in terms of working with David, I think the most important aspect of that was having to fulfill his needs as well as my own, so, and it's actually really helpful, and I really enjoy collaborating on that end. So what I did for him had to satisfy what his film needed, basically, and that was super helpful and a very interesting process to go through. And I would love to do it again. It's much easier than working completely solo. It was very much like working in the Sea and Cake, whereas being able to bounce ideas off of other people and stuff like that. Now, of course, David wasn't involved specifically in the music making, but it was very collaborative on the next step. We would go back and forth with matching the music to the images pretty closely, and it evolved under his guidance as well as my own. So it was great. And I've actually done one other soundtrack that nobody has heard much because it was super limited release, but I did a soundtrack for Tim Sutton's, the director Tim Sutton Pavilion, which came out in 2012, I think. And that was sort of an important, and that's like a full record as well, in between Old Punch Card and the Republic. So so getting to the Republic, that was an important step.
To transition out, the logical extension, at least in my mind, would be that you would take what you do visually and then take what you do sonically and find a way to maybe put those together. Is that something that you've considered or something that is on your radar to do as an artist?
Strangely, it's not something I've really thought about so much.
Really?
Which is sort of odd. Yeah, I guess I feel like there's enough for me to do as it is, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like I'm missing some other avenue that I should have taken. I started posting like synth videos on Instagram, and that has sort of like posed new issues for me in a way, like how to, some of them I'm like, it's just, my gear and what it looks like when I'm moving it around. It's all right here. But then in other posts, I've decided to wet it with an image that's static. I could see getting to film sort of renditions of these raw synth ideas, which I haven't done yet. And I think one of the reasons I like it is because it's not something that I'm known to do. So I feel quite liberated to do whatever I like, or not that I don't anyways, but it feels new and different kind of thing for me to sort of try to put together. So it's been fun to do that.
What is the Instagram handle where they can see the videos for the synth items?
So that one's Prekop, comma.
I'm gonna type it in the comment section here.
And that's my I haven't posted in a couple of weeks because I've been out of town, but I'm looking forward to. And I treat it more of like a scratch pad. I mean, I have been documenting sort of patches that I'm currently working on, and if I can disseminate on a sort of technical level, like what I'm doing and how this is working, sort of, rather than, you know, pontificating artistically, it's more sort of nuts and bolts of like, because I've been doing it for a really long time, so I feel like I have, you know, quite a bit of experience with working with these instruments. So I feel it, if I can be helpful to somebody else trying to do it, you know, I think it's cool.
So you know, to go back a little bit to the photography, can you maybe, as that is kind of its own separate thing, I know that you do show from time to time, and you do have prints that you have for sale, and that's you're pretty active in doing that as well. Could you maybe talk a little bit about your photography and how that, you know, how you're pursuing that and what your process is there?
So I went to art school for painting, but once I got more involved in rock bands like Shrimp Boat and Sea and Cake, I began to paint less because I was on tour a lot and all this stuff. At some point, sort of early on in the Sea and Cake, on a whim, I took a camera with me on tour, you know, I started to get interested in photography. But being a painter, I never took it too seriously. Didn't think about it more than, you know, another department in the art school that I wasn't into, kind of thing.
Right.
But somehow someone lent me a camera and I brought it with me on tour, and it just clicked that it was something great to do while waiting around to, you know, on tour, there's a lot of waiting and doing nothing. And so with a camera, I quickly discovered that I could stay limbered up visually and sort of keep thinking about what, you know, what interests me when looking around and stuff. And it was, the more I did it, the more and more I got way into it. And it was a steep learning curve, kind of, but and in a way that, because anybody can take a photograph, but how to make a good or interesting one is really quite elusive and a mysterious, like why something works and why something doesn't. You know, was something to definitely ponder and think about and try to get better at this nebulous, weird process that takes almost no effort, but is really hard to pull off. So it sort of, I became interested in trying to figure out how to get good at it. And I became obsessed with looking at other photographers and stuff like that. And that's, I think, a big, important process of, you know, learning about what kind of photos you would like to make or try to make, kind of. So in a way, it's a surrogate for painting because I was on tour a lot and was painting less. And my attitude towards photography is like, I don't deem myself a photographer, more like a painter who makes photographs, basically. And I think those are different than like a classic street photographer is interested in what's going on the street, or a portraitist is pretty different. So what I'm doing is I treat it as like really fast, instantaneous photos, paintings, I mean, from a camera, basically. And that's sort of how I continue to do. I mean, I take pictures of anything that catch my eye and that I can think that I can maybe make an interesting image out of. But
the subject matter of your photos is, it feels like it is things that you would walk around and not really pay attention to more. Is that a conscious decision because the composition to show things in that sort of context where you're really stopping and looking at what's there and looking at this, your use of space is really noticeable to me. How is it that you decided that those were the types of things? Do you look for the composition of what you're looking at, or what is it, just whatever catches your eye?
I mean, it's a combo of all those things. I think through experience, I almost see the photo before I take it a lot of times, or whatever. I can visualize it before it happens, and those are often not the best ones, kind of. But I think exercising that muscle is important to being able to get yourself in the position to possibly make interesting photos of anything. And there's a long tradition, like William Eggleston has a famous quote regarding one of the names of his books is called The Democratic Forest, and he's sort of like, it's one of the greatest achievements of making a photo out of anything, you know, and it's sort of, you know, he has famous photos of, you know, a fan on the ceiling, you know, a red room, you know, it's whatever. And in a way, I think the less remarkable the subject is, the more you can imprint your own sort of vision to it, I guess. And that's part of the concept. You can take perfectly really boring, dull photos as well of all that stuff. So there's no guarantee that it's going to work, you know.
And do you think it's the composition or the intention of how you're doing it? What is it to you? Like, if I were to, you know, the cover of your record, Comma, has, it's like a light post and there's a bird on top of the
right,
and it's incredibly striking, right? What elevates that in your mind from just a bird on a light post, right? How do you suss that out of
so like that photo, I think it's not like most of the photos I take, kind of, so it's like an outlier. And, you know, I hope that I could get more of those kinds of photos, you know, that instantly jump out and become, you know, they're sort of effortless in all regards, you know, color, composition, they're very like singular, they're clear what's happening, you know, it's like, it's right there really fast. But oddly enough, those are not my favorite kind of photos. Those are like, that in a way, that photo is like easier to take than the other ones that take longer to recognize that something interesting might be happening. So that photo works great as a record cover. And I like it as a photo as well, but it doesn't possess, well, it's just different than most of the photos that I take. And I think in a way I was probably, at the time I took it, I probably felt like I have to take it. There's a hawk on this bird lamp that will never be there again, probably. And here I am, sort of. So in a way I felt powerless to not take that photo. And in a way, to me, they're almost less interesting in a way as a photographer. But as a record cover image, I think it's pretty good.
This is a hell of a time to be releasing a new record. I'm curious, you know, what has the process been like from the time that you completed Comma until now, where we're, you know, 7 months deep into the pandemic, and you know, for all intents and purposes, anything outside of our homes has shut down, and we're consuming through different channels. What does that process look like for this record?
I'm not sure if I heard the first part of your question, but yeah, normally I would have have set up, some shows and touring and all that stuff to support the record. Obviously, that's not happening. So that's sort of the biggest difference, I guess. In terms of my day-to-day, it hasn't changed much because I work at home and, besides the homeschooling, which we talked about before the broadcast here, I feel fortunate and guilty in some ways that I'm able to sort of continue on in a way. It's going to be a problem when I need to play shows again, and I dearly miss playing live and all that stuff. And I don't expect that's going to be happening soon. So yeah, if you ask me in another 5 months, I'll probably have a much more bleak outlook about the whole thing. But I mean, I trust that at some point, things will get better and we'll be able to do something about it.
It's this record is really an output of your experience with modular synthesizers and modular synthesis. Could you talk a little bit about the gear that you used for the record? And has it changed? Has it altered since, from your previous past few records that this has been your instrumentation of choice?
Yeah, what's interesting is this record is, so there's a lot of modular involved, and on the previous records, I did almost keep it exclusively modular synthesizers. That's not the case on this one. There's sort of, I got a couple of old synthesizers, sort of repaired, sort of like a Juno 106 I used quite a bit, which is, like a regular keyboard. And SH 101, which is another old Roland synthesizer, which is all over comma, mainly because you can sequence it from my modular. It has CV and gate inputs and all that stuff. And so, and it sounds amazing. So I just sort of, I guess it became part of the palette kind of early on in the process. So basically, yeah, this one involves more regular keyboardy type instruments. And I did a more like playing things, I guess, which is not normally how I work on this stuff. So that might be also why it connects a bit more to like C&K kind of stuff. So like a song like The New Last has a lot of me playing stuff and, and stuff like that. So
your use of rhythm is kind of a new thing as well. The way that rhythm is a little bit more in the foreground here.
Yeah, I got into thinking. I was finding it useful to use it in a way to like get me to new ideas with what I always work with. So if you add like a sort of basic straight ahead beat, it changes what else you're going to do. And I kind of got into that give and take between the two things. Whereas, and I think it helped me sort of lean up the melodies and the arrangements and sort of make them more immediate in a sense, because I could rest on, well, there's a beat happening and that sort of takes care of a lot of sonic information in a way. And I think there's a reason that the stuff often involves a beat. I also decided to.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also, these projects, your solo projects, have always felt like a place for you to go in different directions and to try different things sonically and to kind of give yourself the room to do whatever really you wanted to do. Did you, going from the first solo record and then moving into the rest of the solo records, was it a conscious decision to say, I'm just going to focus on synthesizer music after this for your solo project?
Now, so for Old Punch Card, that was where the big shift happened. I was trying to justify all this money I had spent on all this synthesizer stuff. It's like, man, you got to make a record out of this stuff, or otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I was sort of like a frustrated, bedroom electronic producer. Like, it doesn't sound right. I'm not pulling it up. It's so for a couple of years I was like, dissatisfied with all the stuff I was coming out with. Mm-hmm. But I really wanted to do it. Yeah. I wanted to get to a point where I felt like, that I could stand behind it and really sort of, but it was a huge amount of work. And to get to that point was a real trial. And that's why that record is so important to me, I think, coming out the other side.
There is some daylight between your releases. And it looks like, looking at the discography here, are they all spaced out 5 years?
It seems like I have a record every 2.5 years, be like
That's very
record, solo record, C&K, solo. Yeah. Well, actually, probably would be different this time because I can't tour, so I'll probably make another record sooner, because so the cycle is usually like 2 years, and that's the reason. It's not like I never stop working on one thing or the other. Actually, it's just sort of like the cycle of it, how it goes. John and I have a duo project where it's me on Modular and him on electronic drums. And we've done a few tours in Germany mainly. I guess we played in Paris and stuff, and a few short Euro tours. And our plan before this COVID stuff was to make a record of this new project. And we've sort of done a little bit remotely, where I do some tracks and send them to him kind of thing. But the project is really much more like a live, in the moment sort of situation, whatever. So I have a feeling that will be the next thing that will come out once we get it going. I mean, we've recorded quite a bit already, but I can't say that we're close to finishing a record yet, but I think it will happen pretty quickly, and that will probably be the next thing that I'm involved with. And that's exciting. That's a whole new, it's really different from the C&K, and it's really different from my solo stuff, but it involves both of those things.
Is it, what's the duo project?
So it doesn't have a name yet. It's just our names, Sam and John, basically.
Now, you're still in Chicago, but right. I know that there was the core camp of John McIntyre and Jeff Parker and sort of the core Tortoise guys that were in Chicago, and I know Jeff and John have moved.
Right.
Where did John McIntyre move to? He's in Oregon, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Now he's in Portland, yeah.
Okay. Has that been some time?
Well, he was in LA for like a year or two, I guess, and then in Nevada City, Northern California for almost a year. And now he's been in Portland a year, I guess. I'm losing track of where he's going though, but I think he'll be in Portland for a while.
That could be like a good quarantine game. Where in the United States is John McIntyre? I may be able to work that out. Is it all remote collaboration, or are you guys working in studio together on this new duo project?
Well, we hope to be in a studio. I mean, I think it could work remotely, but I think the real essence of the project and the material is like live together, sort of improvising. They're long pieces in real time, basically. And we could do other kinds of material, but it would just be, it would change the nature of it so much that that would then be something else entirely. So I think our concept is that we would do it, you know, together in a studio. We've recorded. So I mixed Comma with John in November in Portland, and we recorded a bunch during that time, the two of us, and we played a show in Portland and stuff. And then we have a lot of recordings from our live shows, you know, some of that stuff might work. And I've done a few tracks, the beginnings of things that I've sent John, and yeah, so it might be a combination of the two.
You know, with that project being kind of improvised and in the moment and live, and with the modular, I remember seeing the show collaboration that you did for your previous record, and it's very in the moment. Like, you know, modular synthesizers, when you're performing just with that modular synthesizer.
Yeah.
I think I heard you say something to the effect of, when you're performing with a modular synthesizer, you just have to trust the machine. It's not going to be something that you're going to get the same thing out of when you record that time, when you're in that environment and the improvised thing. Do you tend to record your live sets when you're doing them for potential release on future projects?
So I haven't done that for my solo stuff, but that's, yeah, John and I we almost record all of our concerts basically, yeah. So that's we do that. So I think there's two pieces like that. Well, I know one for sure has been released. You can look on iTunes, Sam Prekop, John McIntyre. And that's like from a live thing that we did in Hamburg or something. And then
is that officially released, or is that just
yeah, it's official.
Okay.
There's like a little EP of it, physically very limited release. I don't think it's available anywhere. You know, it's sort of like 100 were made and they cost a lot of money or whatever.
Discogs only.
Yeah.
For the low $5,000, you can get this.
Yeah, yeah. What I do have one actually now.
Oh, do you? For sale. Okay, right
here.
You
mentioned $5,000. Yeah.
You want to support the artist? Just Venmo Sam $5,000, and he'll give you a signed copy of this release.
Oh yes, no problem.
I gotta say, honestly, especially during this period of no shows, that first of all, kind of always knowing, but really kind of realizing that Spotify is a horrible, evil machine, and that the people at Bandcamp deserve a lot of love for what they've done and how they've been as a platform. And I hope that whatever good comes out of a pandemic, that really understanding the importance of the arts in people's lives. I mean, I think that the whole concept, the whole idea of being able to directly support an artist. I have multiple friends that have put out projects that, you know, as kind of a extended community of people that I'm connected with, that we do that. We show up and we, you know, and I think that's a big thing to be able to do that. And I guess as an artist, and this probably, obviously you've got a good thing, you know, in terms of your record distribution and huge, you know, audience for this work. And, but for your photography, do you do a lot of sort of direct to your, you know, direct sales from your photography to people that could, you know, buy your work?
I do, but I try not to make it like something that I do all the time. So it's, you know, it happens, I'd say like a couple of times a year or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's been completely pleasant, and I enjoy interacting with the fans, you know, and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's been all good.
Yeah.
But it's not something I want to do like all the time, you know. So I sort of, I feel like it's pretty sporadic that I, you know, make it available. But
Well, I buy one of your prints today because I've been dying to get some of your work, and so it's gonna be like my birthday present to myself.
Today your birthday?
Today's my birthday.
Oh,
Yeah.
happy birthday, man!
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's like the coolest thing. It's like I got Sam from the CK. I'm gonna order a print. It's gonna be a good day. A couple more questions, and I'll let you get on. I know you've got a lot on your plate today. What's the next? I guess the next step for the Sea and Cake, and then for your solo work, because I know you've got the duo thing going, and that's going to be the next thing that comes down the pipeline. But
yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, the duo thing I suspect will be the next thing.
Yeah.
And then the Sea and Cake, I've already been trying to find my guitar. You know, I haven't seen it in a while. But somebody posted a picture of me playing guitar. I'm like, you know what? I should play guitar again. It looks quite interesting. So I'm sort of, I'm getting that feeling. Yeah, so I've not played guitar since March, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've been sort of, that is one weird thing with the music. It's like, if I'm in the electronic realm, like the thought of like a Sea and Cake song does not enter my mind. You know, I don't like dabble on writing a Sea and Cake tune on the side, you know, while I'm deep in modular land. They just don't coexist really.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very.
I have done things. So there's a few songs. One example that I like to cite is it's on. The song is called In Keeping on Moonlight Butterfly. It's like a long piece on that EP. And that song started from a modular synth patch kind of thing. So there have been cases, and like Runner, there's quite a bit of modular kind of things that started as a modular idea for Sea and Cake. For Any Day, I flipped it, and there's like no synthesizer from me on it at all on that whole record. Very like straight ahead guitar vocal record. So, so the next one, maybe, you know, get back to bridging the two a bit more, perhaps.
Any ideas for what type of material you want to do, or do you just start to play and it just naturally?
Well, I mean, you can see where I'm at. Like I haven't seen my guitar in months, and I find it. You know, once I start playing, it's all in the work. You know, it's like once I start playing, one thing will lead to the next thing, and you know, I'll call Archer up, and who's one of my greatest cheerleaders. So it's always, he'll be like, "That sounds amazing. Let's do that," and I'm like, "Are you sure?" or whatever. But so he's good to have around. You know, keep things going and fresh.
Yeah, well, it's great to be able to have that kind of core group of people to work with too that are inspiring and inspired by your work, and I think it's a very, very cool and special thing that you know, in kind of preparation for this, I went through a ton of stuff or different things, and there's a lot of reviews that are out on the new record, but one of the articles, and it really stuck out to me, said that you were one of the architects of the post-rock, and I know people hate that term, but you were
I don't mind it. I said I don't mind it.
You know, but that's, you know, that you were one of the architects of that post-rock sound that was coming out of Chicago, and that still has just been for me personally, finding the first generation of like the first Sea and Cake records, the first Tortoise records, the whole kind of Thrill Jockey discography at that period of time when all of that stuff first came out, it really was an incredibly powerful thing for me to hear those first records. Is this something that you think about from time to time, your personal influence in sort of this global phenomenon that's post-rock? Again, I know I've talked to different people involved in different bands from the scene, and some people shudder at that, and some people are okay with it. But what is, you know, do you stop and think about that sometimes, Sam?
Not really. I have to say I'm often surprised and very pleased to hear people, you know, will claim and tell me how important such and such record is and what an influence it's been on that. And so I'm always, I guess if I think about it for more than a second, I'm like, okay, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years and I'm still doing it. So I clearly have had enough effect on people to be able, you know, to have sustained this unusual career or whatever. But so I'm always flattered to hear that I've had an effect on, mostly on other musicians. You know, I hear it from unexpected people out of the blue, you know, like, I can't believe.
Who are some examples? If you don't mind.
So the latest one is, you know, Raphael Toral.
I've heard the name. Mm-hmm.
So he's like an experimental musician. And I was really into his records, you know, I'd say like 10 or 15 years ago, or whatever. And a couple of weeks ago, yeah, he friended me on Facebook or something and whatever. And so, and this has happened many times. Like, he's the one I'm thinking of right now, or whatever. There's been some others,
yeah,
as well. And yeah, I'm like, oh man, I love your records. And he's like, I love your record, you know, amazing. And so, and this kind of stuff happens pretty often. It's pretty great. And so,
yeah. What do you think it was about starting to seeing Cake at the time that you did, and having, you know, John McEntire and sort of that whole extended community of people in Chicago at that time that kind of propelled this thing forward?
You mean musically?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I'll say, getting back to like the term post-rock, it was helpful to focus attention on it. So it's sort of hand in hand. That's why I will never badmouth the term, you know, because any recognition is good and helpful, and sort of, so I feel lucky that people paid attention to what we were doing at the time, and labeling it something helped solidify and focus that attention. So
yeah, because it's quite a scene, considering that, you know, there have been multiple bands that have come and gone, and really great bands too. People that have done great work, solo artists, and there's just a core group of you guys that came out all at relatively around the same time. That still, you know, I mean, you have longevity. You have your work, in my opinion, continues to evolve in these really interesting ways, as opposed to kind of repeating the same thing over and over again. And it's just a really unique and special thing to me to be able to witness that, you know, from afar, because it's definitely not your normal rock band trajectory by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. From my perspective, I think the longevity may have helped that I don't, you know, like taking photos, making paintings, you know, like I'm not only, like the rock band is not my whole life, I guess, you know. Right. So, and I think that's the case with, you know, like Archer as well, you know, and I think that's been helpful to be able to do it for 25 years. You know, I think if you're solely consumed with being in the band, you're going to be headed for a certain demise, I think.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, people ask us, you know, how can you guys still be in a band together? And I and I always feel like if we can possibly, you know, still pull off another record, it would be a shame not to, basically. And we just, and I trust that I'll recognize, or someone will say, okay, it's just not working anymore. Time to do something else. And we haven't hit that yet. It could happen on this next one, though. We'll see. I don't take it for granted. You know.
You're going to tune into the next season of CFK.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, Sam, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I've been a big fan of yours for a very, very long time. I think Comma is a brilliant record, and and I'm really excited to hear about what's going on with you next and keeping up with whatever you're doing creatively, because you're a force to be reckoned with, and very, very happy that you came on today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
All right. Here. All right. Bye-bye.